back to the show. And today is Ash Wednesday, and also it's the start of Lent, isn't it?
It certainly is.
We're supposed to give up everything now between now and every good thing in this world between now and Easter.
Yes, but you know what? We're going to talk about the great traditions, and who better than Shane Lahan to come in here and tell us and school us.
That's it. Listen, do you know what? I was so excited yesterday. We had Shrove Tuesday, Pancake Night, as we always called it. We called anything else. And I was laughing. I was making the pancakes at home, you know. And I was thinking back, years back, long ago when I finished college, I used to live in Paris. I went to Paris. I lived there for a year.
Did you?
Yeah, and it was great. And I remember I used to come out in the metro in a place called Canal Saint-Martin, and I used to arrive up, and there was a man, he used to be making crepes, you know. And, you know, I used to always love the smell of them. And I used to get a bare soup, butter and sugar, and I'd be going like a young fellow. I was going down like a child still, because we all love pancakes. But it got me thinking, those pancakes were radically different. Those French crepes aren't like Irish pancakes at all.
No.
And I go back, and last night I was making pancakes just like my mother used to make, right? And she used to have a special pan and all for the pancakes. It used to come out from underneath the sink, okay? And always and ever it was butter, okay?
Yeah. That's right,
butter always. And the whole house would be full of smoke, right, from the butter going. Right? And then the Irish pancakes, you know, they weren't like the French fancies. They were big, fat, hairy Irish pancakes, right? And you know, I have now they go down, but there was a burniness about them, and there was a crust on the edge of them that we used to all love.
They were quite dry compared to these crepe things.
They were, and you know what? We were using up all the eggs that you could imagine at the time. But there was a reason why the Irish pancake, and I think we need to bring this back. Forget about the French things. The big fat Irish buttery pancake, right?
Yeah.
Should be made because they used to put charms into them, right? And I brought them in here, right? So we have the button, we have the ring, and we have the coin.
Yeah.
And to put those and conceal them in, you needed something nice and big and so on. And of course, everyone wanted the ring, because that meant that you were going to get married. That was fine altogether. People, just like the barn rack. Likewise, you had the button. Now, the button was interesting. The button meant you were probably going to marry a bachelor if you were a girl, or if you were a boy, you were going to remain a bachelor. You weren't going to get married at all.
Okay.
And of course, the coin meant you were going to marry money, money and good fortune.
There's no death or anything here like there is in Halloween.
No, this was all related to marriage and all of those
things.
things.
Where did the pancakes come from, Shane? It was just a thing that goes back.
Listen, you had to use up all the eggs.
So that's what it was.
That's what it was. But before I get to that, let me tell you, the ritual of Pancake Night was looked forward to like nothing else. Yeah. And it was a whole community, whole family sort of affair, right? And they used to mix up, and I brought in, this is a besom, as we would call it, right? It looks like, and this was for mixing up the batter. Sure, there was no mixers, there was no...
It's a bit of straw, is it?
Well, this one actually this is just made from something, I bought this in France, actually. The Irish one would have been made of broom, would have been made of twigs and so on. And I've seen loads of images dyed from paintings and so on of Pancake Night, where you would see this particular
that was going to fluff them up as well.
Because think about it, you had to batter them, that's what the batter was.
A lot of eggs as well to be mixed in.
A big fire that night, okay, this is a lovely illustration from Halls, Ireland, okay, and you can see the woman down the front there, you can see her holding the little besom for doing it, but they had a big pan.
There it is,
the big pan over the fire. They used to bring the holly from Christmas time, because the holly went up in a fantastic flame. It was dried out this time of the year.
Gone brown.
And gone brown, but you really needed some heat to come underneath the pan for this. Okay?
Quick heat.
Absolutely.
And that was the holly.
That was the holly did that. But the most important thing then was that they all gathered around, and the eldest girl then, her job, the most marriageable, she was there, and she had to toss the pancake. She had to flip the pancake. So I'm giving you a little bit of a challenge on both of you.
So this is where I was wondering what you wanted us to do.
So if the pancake, just before you do it now, I'll tell you what will happen, right? Yeah. If the pancake goes up and it lands down perfectly, you're going to be married within 12 months. That's great. However, if it fell over the side of the pan, right, that wasn't great at all, okay, or on top of that, it could go all the way back into the fire, into the ashes, you were doomed altogether. So
what pressure on that poor marriageable woman?
There was, and people took it great, like the young girls were all...
Of course they were stressed out, I'd say.
Go on, give it a go. Come on, Maura.
Okay.
Ho-ho!
Woohoo! That's it,
all right.
Absolutely brilliant. Oh, lads, you're professional.
Jeez, you've done this before, though, hey?
I was only married once, though.
Because we used to go back into school.
He won't say, stop before you or your head, as they say. Show us.
No, go do it again, so
That's a great
It's always like this, It's like what happens when you get married, I suppose.
This is true. Anyway, put this down. Anyway, Shane, continue.
I remember remember when we were young then, we'd be into school today, Ash Wednesday, we'd be in, and the first thing you'd be saying, how many did you eat? How many did you have, you know? And there was a great boast about that, you know? And some fella might have gone 5, you know? Somebody else maybe 6. And you knew any fella who was going up to double figures, he was only telling fibs because none of us could. But the main thing we put on them, of course, that time was some sugar and some butter. That was about it. We never saw a lemon. Actually, we never saw a real lemon ever. The only thing we saw in the 1970s was the plastic lemon, you know? And that's still very popular. People use that quite a lot. But I just thought it was so...
What about jam?
Yeah, I'd say people did in the past. I have no accounts of it, but maybe...
Honey, I remember honey.
Yeah, honey as well.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd be interested in the honey. But on top of that, they used to make buttermilk pancakes, and not with the buttermilk that you get today. Literally, when they churned the butter, okay, and the buttermilk that came off was the sweetest, the creamiest, absolutely beautiful.
Almost
and to make
frothy,
pancakes with that, they were naturally sweet anyway. So you would eat them like, you know, pancakes are a treat. No, they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But like, why were we eating pancakes, as you said to me? Well, what you're doing really is you're using up all the eggs.
Before the fasting.
Before the fast, there's a feast, and that's what we're on. That was on pancake night. As many eggs as you could, because you couldn't eat an egg for the whole duration of Lent. And there was another reason.
Oh, you couldn't eat an egg?
No eggs, because that's why we have Easter eggs at the end of it.
I didn't realise
so there was no eggs whatsoever. But what was interesting is that you were also killing off the fowl, okay? Because a lot of the fowl that you had were no longer sort of laying. The old hens that weren't there, and there's no point in feeding them throughout the year. So this was the period of time when you kind of, you killed off the fowl. In fact, there were some very gruesome details around Shrove Tuesday and around this time of the year when people used to actually have a thing for killing hens, or killing hen trashing, or what they called throwing at the cocks, for example, where they would throw sticks and they would kill them and so on. So we had quite a barbaric past, okay?
What would they do after they killed them? Would they eat them, or would they?
They would take them home and they'd put them in the pot and they'd eat them and so on. So, but it was a time for, like, let's say, I love, with the phrase that we have when we talk about someone who's getting on, they say, she's no spring chicken, or he's no spring chicken, or whatever.
That's where it comes
we're
from.
now getting rid of the old gang and getting ready for the spring chickens that are coming on, you see? That would be the new ones that are there. But I suppose that's what happened then, is that everybody would have gotten married on Shrove Tuesday. Shrove Tuesday, of all the days of the year, was the luckiest day in the year to be married. And if you were going out with a girl on go, or you fancied her, and you might want to propose, you wouldn't say, will you marry me? You'd say to her, what are you doing next Shrove? Or like, would you meet me on Shrove? You know, that was the way the marriage proposal went in the past. So everyone got married. And in fact, if you look up genealogy.ie, and we have the births, marriages and deaths, and if you look up the marriages, and if you knew when Shrove was, I can guarantee you, nearly every single person was married before the Lenten period.
Until when, though? Probably until the early 1900s or what?
I'd say you're up to the 1950s, 1960s,
really?
1970s, yeah. My own parents, for example, they got married after Lent, okay? So they didn't get married on Shrove Tuesday, but there was no marriage during those periods.
You couldn't get married during Lent?
Well, you had to consummate your marriage, okay? And you had to do that, and if you didn't, because there was no sex during Lent either, so because of that, you had to be married on Shrove. Yeah, no fun whatsoever during the entire Lenten period, okay? So everyone was off everything. But there was a very funny story from William Le Fanu. Le Fanu was one of my favourite people. He was a great engineer. He was responsible for most of the railways around Ireland. But around the end of the 19th century, he said, in Donegal, in Tory Island, everyone wanted to get married, so much so that when the weather was very bad and the boat couldn't go across, the priest used to stand on the mainland, and those who wanted to get married were over on the island on the other side, lined up, and he used to read the ceremony across the water, and that would be good enough for them to be married at that time of the year.
But come here, say if Shrove Tuesday came and went.
Yes.
And no proposal came.
Yeah.
What happened to you then?
Well, no proposal came. Well, I suppose you were in trouble. One is that you might go to Skellig. That was one of the great traditions we had, okay? So Skellig was a big part of this time of the year, and we often called Shrove Tuesday Skelliging Day or Skellig Day and so on. And the reason for that is that people thought that they calculated the date of Easter and length differently on the island, and because of that, if you wanted to get married, you could go out to the island to get married. So
To the Skelligs?
To the Skelligs. Okay?
Wow.
Now, there was actually a pilgrimage to the Skelligs for people who were not married, okay? And it was well taken up. And in fact, right throughout the 19th century, we have Lady Wilde, Oscar Wilde's mother, telling us this account, that there were droves of people going out. It was like a singles club, okay? Everyone and anyone was going out, right? And it turned into absolute
And did they meet up out there, like get together, tender, like the tender of Skellig
They were
Island?
meant to be in prayer and penance and all that kind of thing, but sure, it went mad. There was drink and dancing and all sorts of debauchery.
No guards.
Absolutely. The guards eventually had to come, okay? It was outlawed, okay? And the constabulary were on the island stopping people going there. But what arose from that day, which is interesting, was what we called the Skellig lists. And I brought a few of these in to show you, okay? And these were things that were printed, particularly right throughout the 19th century, for example. This is one here called the Brighton Lounge. And what it actually is, and this would have been mid-19th century. Now, these continued, let me tell you, right up to the 20th century. In fact, right up to the 1970s, 1980s. I've recorded people who wrote these down in South Kerry, down in Valencia, and Ballinskelligs and areas like that.
So what does the list mean then? If you're on the list, what does that mean?
So what it was, Dahi, was that this was a list of people who might be going to Skellig, okay? But what they were was that you would pick out people who were probably not married, number one, okay? But there might be a little bit of thing going on, somebody fancied someone or whatever.
This is incredible. It's like Bridgerton.
It is. It could be like an older person with a younger person, because that was often the case as well. And what you had was that someone would be picked out for maybe their hairstyle, their clothing, their mannerisms.
In a good way?
No.
In a bad way?
In the worst way you could imagine, right? If they were gambling, if they were drinking, you know.
Beware of these.
So they were being outed?
Oh, absolutely. This was public humiliation, and they were anonymous. Nobody knew who wrote these, okay? And they were...
Just like Bridgerton.
They were really hard-hitting, okay? They absolutely... If you found yourself on the list...
being shamed in public.
Absolutely huge. And you know what I think about it? The people who wrote it also were very clever. They put themselves on the lists as well, okay? And they often gave themselves an awful doing off, right? So that nobody would suspect it was them in the first place.
I just love the idea of going out to the Skelligs for like a kind of, you know.
Oh yeah.
For the single stuff.
Seriously?
And it was, but there was that sort of tradition. But it gets even worse than that, right? Today is Ash Wednesday. Next Sunday is a big day on the calendar now as well, okay? Because around this time of the year, what happens is we've all sorts of other humiliations that went on. Next Sunday was sometimes called Salting Day. Salting because when people were going to mass, because that was the big public occasion, young fellas would come along with salt and they'd throw the salt all over them. Why? Because they were to be preserved for another year so that they could be...
So they were mocking them.
They were mocking them that way. On top of that, you had what we call the ash bags. Today is Ash Wednesday, but they used to get a small little bag, fill it with ash from the fireplace, and they would pin it just very carefully on the back of someone's overcoat or someone's shawl and so on. And of course, when they were going to mass, everyone saw it. But those bags would open up invariably and would sprinkle ash and destroy their coats. And they were marked. Chalk Sunday is also what it's called. People used to come along, they used to get chalk on people's sleeves, on people's coats. You'd be marked out.
That's if you were just kind of a bit of a loser. That's the way they looked at you.
In this time, to be married was everything.
That's what I mean. So you were just...
You were not married.
Not worthy.
You were open to ridicule.
You were an outcast.
Yeah, and you were promoting fertility. And this was a kind of a folk tradition which would promote that. There was a thing in Kilkenny called drawing the log, where they used to sit them up on top of a log, drag them along, and people used to throw eggs and flour at them. It was called Squirting Day. Squirting Day was when they used to get water and douse them in water. Later on, I remember this, and I've interviewed people that they used to have the old washing up liquid bottles, you know, and the people going around to be all-out warfare between young people and old people this time of the year.
God.
There was everything.
Shane, we've come in now, we've leave it there.
That's enough information. Apart from going to the Skelligs, that's all I want to know about this whole thing.
That's it.
That's a great fun.
Flipping the pancake, you were professional.
Shane, go on.
We've been married for another while.
We'll stick it over for another one. George Hamilton will be here next Wednesday, and he will be telling us